It seems like every time we make headway against malaria, the mosquitoes find a way to outsmart us,
Yeah,
especially with these insecticide-resistant strains becoming so prevalent.
yeah,
Makes you wonder, will we ever truly get a handle on this disease? But today we're diving into something that could be a real game changer.
absolutely. We've been looking into some really interesting new findings from scientific studies, news reports, all sorts of sources. And they all seem to suggest this surprising possibility.
Okay.
What if, and this is pretty wild, what if a drug that's already being used in humans
Yeah.
could actually turn our blood into a weapon against mosquitoes?
Wow. Okay, that's definitely attention-grabbing. A
Yeah.
human drug that can kill mosquitoes.
Yep, that's the potential of a drug called nitisinone, and that's what we're going to explore today.
So for everyone listening, our goal today is to really break down the science behind this discovery, look at the possible benefits, the potential challenges, and really try to grasp what this could mean for the future of malaria control. And don't worry, we'll keep the science clear and easy to understand.
Absolutely.
So what exactly did these researchers find?
Well, the main discovery, which was published in Science Translational Medicine, is pretty amazing. They basically found that when mosquitoes feed on blood that contains this drug, nitisinone, they don't just get sick, they actually die. It's a pretty direct and powerful effect.
That's a big deal. So how does a drug that's designed to help people with a rare disease end up being so deadly to mosquitoes? What's the connection?
The key is that nitisinone targets a very specific protein, an enzyme called 4-hydroxyphenyl pyruvate dioxygenase.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is, right? We'll just call it HPPD for short. So in humans with certain genetic disorders, nitisinone helps by blocking this enzyme, this HPPD, to prevent the buildup of toxic substances. But it turns out that mosquitoes also rely on this very same enzyme to properly digest blood.
Oh, interesting. So it's like a shared weakness.
Yeah, exactly.
When a mosquito drinks blood with nitisinone in it, it kind of messes up their whole digestive system.
Exactly. It disrupts their ability to process that blood meal. It's kind of like, imagine a factory assembly line where each step depends on the one before it. Nitisinone is like removing a crucial tool on that assembly line, bringing the whole process to a screeching halt 134. And here's the really important part. This doesn't just affect young mosquitoes.
Okay.
It's lethal to mosquitoes of all ages, even those older ones that are the primary carriers of the malaria parasite.
That is huge because we know that those older mosquitoes have had more chances to pick up the parasite and spread the disease. And I also understand that this might be effective against those insecticide-resistant mosquitoes that are such a problem.
That's right. That's really the potential breakthrough here. Nitisinone essentially attacks the mosquito in a completely different way than the insecticides we've been using for so long. So those resistance mechanisms that have developed against those older insecticides,
Yeah.
they might not even work against nitisinone 14.
That sounds like a major step forward. Now, we've talked about ivermectin in the past as a potential tool for mosquito control.
Right.
How does nitisinone compare? What makes it different or potentially better?
Well, there are a few really promising aspects. First, nitisinone seems to stay in the bloodstream longer than ivermectin 14. So a single dose could potentially offer protection against mosquitoes for a longer period. Second, early research suggests it might be less harmful to the environment 14. And possibly most important for long-term control, the way nitisinone works makes it seem less likely that mosquitoes will develop resistance to it 14. It's targeting such a fundamental process in their digestion.
Wow.
And you know what's even more exciting? We could potentially use nitisinone and ivermectin in rotation in areas where resistance to either one might emerge 14.
That's a really smart strategy. So how did scientists even discover this? It's not like they were intentionally testing out human medications on mosquitoes, right?
It was actually a bit of a happy accident, you could say. Researchers were studying mosquitoes that had been fed blood samples from patients being treated with nitisinone for a very rare genetic disorder called alkaptonuria 24. And they noticed that these mosquitoes were dying just hours after feeding 24. It was a totally unexpected but very, very important observation.
Talk about a lucky break for science. Okay, so we've talked about how nitisinone affects mosquitoes, but what about its effects on humans? All drugs have potential side effects. So what are some of the things we need to be aware of if this were to be used more widely in people for mosquito control?
That's a crucial point. It's important to remember that while nitisinone is considered generally safe for its current use, which is treating those specific genetic conditions, we absolutely have to think about potential side effects if it were to be used much more broadly. Some of the common side effects people experience when taking nitisinone include things like headaches, upset stomach, diarrhea, gastrointestinal issues 12. There can also be changes in blood cell counts, which could lead to a lower platelet count, a condition called thrombocytopenia,
Oh, wow.
and a lower white blood cell count, which is called leukopenia. And this could, theoretically, increase the risk of infections and make people more prone to bruising and bleeding, too.
Those are things that would definitely require careful monitoring. Are there any other more serious side effects we should know about?
Yes, there are a few potentially serious side effects, though they are less frequent.
Okay.
Liver problems are a concern, and symptoms like persistent nausea, severe abdominal pain, yellowing of the skin or eyes, or dark urine would definitely require immediate medical attention 12.
Okay.
And while allergic reactions are rare, they can occur. Symptoms range from rashes and itching to more severe things like swelling of the face or throat, severe dizziness, and difficulty breathing 1.
So it sounds like while it's generally well tolerated in the small group of patients currently using it on a much larger scale for mosquito control would require really, really careful evaluation and monitoring to manage those potential risks. We really have to weigh the benefits of preventing malaria against the potential downsides.
That's exactly right. And we need more research. Extensive research is essential to figure out safe and effective dosages for this new purpose.
Right.
And to understand any long-term effects of using nitisinone outside of its current medical use.
Okay, so we've covered the direct effects on mosquitoes and the potential effects on humans. Now, let's zoom out a bit and consider the broader ecological impact.
Right.
What kind of impact could we see if nitisinone were used more widely to control mosquito populations?
This is where it gets really fascinating, because we have to think about the intricate balance of ecosystems. On the plus side, nitisinone seems to be pretty specific in its action. By targeting HPPD, which is crucial for those blood-feeding insects, it seems to be less likely to harm those beneficial insects, the non-target organisms. Like, for example, pollinators like bees or aquatic life, which often suffer when we use those broad-spectrum insecticides, the traditional ones like pyrethroids 3415.
That's a great point, because we're always hearing about declining insect populations, so a more targeted approach would be much better for the environment.
Yes.
What about the issue of resistance? Could using nitisinone lead to resistance developing in other insects, not just mosquitoes, but other species?
Well, that's the hope. Because nitisinone works by disrupting blood digestion, and that's a very specific process, it's quite different from the way those traditional insecticides work, the ones that target the nervous system. So the thinking is that the risk of resistance developing might be lower with nitisinone 36. And as we've already discussed, lab tests have shown that it's effective even against mosquito populations that are already resistant to other insecticides. And here's another plus. Nitisinone seems to be less persistent and less toxic in the environment than some other options, like ivermectin, which can accumulate and potentially harm other invertebrates 45.
Okay, those are some strong arguments in its favor from an environmental perspective. But are there any potential downsides we should consider? Any potential risks to the ecosystem?
Yes, we have to be cautious. While mosquitoes are the main target, other insects that feed on blood, like some midges and fleas,
Right.
or even animals that might eat mosquitoes or ingest blood containing nitisinone, like bats or birds, they could be affected. We definitely need more research to understand the full scope of its impact 13. And we also have to think about the potential impact on the food web. If we significantly reduce mosquito populations, there could be some ripple effects because mosquitoes do serve as food for some animals. However, in areas where malaria is a huge public health problem, the priority, understandably, is often focused on protecting human health 18.
I see. It's a complicated situation with many factors to weigh.
It is.
And even with this new approach, this different mechanism, is there still a chance that mosquitoes could eventually become resistant to nitisinone if it's used extensively?
That's a valid concern. Overuse of any control method can lead to resistance over time. We've seen it with ivermectin in some areas 45. That's why the idea of rotating nitisinone with other methods, like ivermectin in places where it's still effective, is so important. We want to make sure that whatever tools we use remain effective over the long term.
That makes sense.
And we also have to keep a close eye out for any unexpected long-term health effects in humans, especially if we start using nitisinone more widely in areas with malaria. particularly in people who don't have the genetic conditions for which it's currently prescribed 18.
Right. It sounds like a constant balancing act between potential benefits and possible risks.
Yeah.
You mentioned a comparison between nitisinone and other control methods. Could you give us a quick rundown?
Sure. If we compare nitisinone to those traditional insecticides, nitisinone seems to be more targeted. It primarily affects blood-feeding insects, while a lot of those older insecticides have a much broader impact, affecting a wider range of organisms.
Right.
Compared to ivermectin, nitisinone seems to be more targeted as well. As for resistance risk, well, as we've discussed, nitisinone's unique mechanism suggests that the risk might be lower compared to the resistance we're seeing with traditional insecticides and increasingly with ivermectin. And when we look at how long these substances stay in the environment, nitisinone breaks down relatively quickly in the human body, while those traditional insecticides can stick around for a long time. Ivermectin, too, can persist in soil and water.
That comparison really highlights the potential advantages of nitisinone.
Yeah.
So what are the next steps in turning this promising discovery into an actual tool for malaria control?
Well, the research is still ongoing. It's relatively early in the process for this particular application.
Okay.
But there are semi-field trials happening, and they're really important. These trials will help determine the most effective and safest dosages in real-world settings and give us more information about the ecological impacts of 58. The hope is that we can eventually integrate nitisinone into a more comprehensive approach to malaria control. Using it alongside things like bed nets and vaccines to provide even better protection 14.
Right.
And there's a really interesting potential bonus here. If we start using more nitisinone for mosquito control, the increased demand could actually drive down the cost of the drug for patients who rely on it for those rare genetic disorders 45.
That would be fantastic, addressing two health problems at once.
Yeah.
Now, we've touched on this, but let's really clarify how effective nitisinone might be compared to what we're currently using. We know it works against insecticide-resistant mosquitoes, but how does it compare in terms of overall effectiveness?
Right. Its ability to kill those resistant strains is a huge plus 15.
Yeah.
And just to remind everyone why that is, it's because it targets that HPPD enzyme which disrupts the mosquito's blood digestion, a completely different way of working than those older nerve agent insecticides 56.
Okay.
Plus, the fact that nitisinone stays in the blood longer than ivermectin suggests that a single dose could protect a person from mosquitoes for a longer period 236.
So how does it stack up in terms of actually killing mosquitoes?
Well, lab studies have shown that nitisinone can be even better at killing mosquitoes of all ages, even those older ones that spread malaria. And it can do this even at lower doses than ivermectin 24.
Okay.
And there's research suggesting that it's actually more potent than some other insecticides that are being used or considered, like clothianidin and pyrethroids. This means that it could be a very effective option for indoor residual spraying 2-1.
So for everyone listening, the takeaway here is that nitisinone is a potentially revolutionary tool in our fight against mosquitoes and malaria. It's not just an improvement on existing methods, it's a whole new approach.
Yes.
And that's why it works against those resistant strains and could offer longer-lasting protection.
Exactly. We're essentially turning the human host into a weapon against the disease vector.
But like with any scientific discovery, there are still things we need to learn. We need more research to fully understand the ecological effects, figure out the best ways to use it, and make sure it's safe for people over the long term.
Absolutely. We need to be careful and thorough with our research and evaluation as we move forward. This is an exciting development, but it's still early days.
So, as you process all this information, think about the ethical and practical considerations of using a drug like this on a large scale. We have this urgent need to fight malaria, a disease that tragically claims so many lives, especially young children, but we also need to be mindful of potential environmental and health impacts. It's a complex issue with a lot to consider. This is a topic that deserves our attention, and I encourage you to learn more about the ongoing research and the discussions surrounding these new strategies for controlling disease-carrying insects. It's definitely something to think about.
I agree.
Food for thought, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me.